My name is Harry Ortof. I'm pursuing my MS in media management at Fordham University. I live in Queens, New York, and I'm a corporate communications intern for Crown Media. Before my master's, I studied journalism at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where I was the writer and editor at our online digital publication, the Amherst Wire, and I was a Division I swimmer. Unfortunately, what made me pursue my master's was the COVID-19 pandemic. I graduated in 2020 in May. There were not a lot of job prospects out there. In fact, a lot of people were getting laid off. And I decided that I wanted to learn more about digital media as a business rather than from a content creation perspective. I think that they are both equally valuable, but I think without one, it's hard to do the other. Obviously it's great to write and record audio and create media, but if you don't know how to monetize it and profit from it, it's hard to make a living out of it. I was originally intrigued by the media management program because it was so in line with what I was looking to get out of a secondary education after undergrad. On top of that, I have legacy. My mom is actually a professor of law at Fordham, and my sister attends it currently. On top of that, I live in New York, and I wanted to study in the middle of New York City because it's the media capital of the United States and to an extent the world. I think that's really important because you gain a lot of meaningful connections with people that work and live in this city, and it's somewhere I've lived my entire life, and I would really like to, get to know it better. I think my interest in journalism really stems from my inner desire to promote social change in a positive light. In college, I covered a lot of different social issues like economic inequity, food insecurity, local and state political events, immigration issues. And, journalism is the foundation to our democracy. Without it, we simply would not be able to operate as a democracy. We wouldn't have representatives. We would just have a tyrant, a dictator. A large part of the reason we moved away from the British king was because he essentially, or I should say the British crown essentially had an embargo on anything printed that was not in a favorable light towards the British king. And I think that's really important that we remember that we created this democracy because we didn't want to be under a tyrannical ruler. We value everybody's rights as an individual. And part of that is understanding that the press needs to be free and unrestrained to cover its elected representatives, free to cover businesses and, local events in your neighborhood. And, it can promote a lot of social good. It can create a lot of good change. We've seen it with the Wall Street Journal, with the Facebook files. We've seen it with the Panama Papers. We've seen it with a lot of investigative reporting from ProPublica. And I would like to be part of that social change. The first thing any student should know is that there's 3 required courses: consumer adoption of new media, innovation in media business models, and media systems and markets. And those essentially teach you the basics of the media as a business. Some things that I learned is that in consumer adoption of new media, that there's a lot of niche audiences that people tend to overlook because the internet has really democratized content creation, if that makes sense. Instead of it being one or two, multinational corporations, now it's a lot of individuals or smaller businesses creating content. And there's really just an unlimited amount of media people can consume. And with that comes unlimited audiences, essentially. The second thing, innovation in media business models, really taught me about how things like distribution, ad sales, streaming really contribute to a media business's success. You know, it's an industry that is constantly evolving, constantly changing. And as a media professional, you need to sort of be on top of that. Obviously, you know, an easy example would be TikTok. 2 years ago, nobody knew what TikTok was, and now suddenly advertisers, marketers have to, you know, become a TikTok aficionado, for lack of a better term. And third, media systems and markets really teaches you about how different geographies consume, distribute, and promote content and media in general differently. So obviously, you know, the needs of Atlanta, Georgia are not the same as London, United Kingdom. And with that comes different strategies, right? So like I said, marketers and other media professionals need to understand that different cultures accept and deny promote or advertising differently. You know, you can't say, I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit here. It's hard to say, you know, what specific audiences want, but it's even harder to decide when when money comes into that. So it really takes you into the inner workings of that decision behind, we're going to fund this campaign, we're going to defund this campaign, etc. It's really, to put it simply, it's really put a very big lens on a very small industry. So, you know, when the pandemic hit, everybody was looking to consume some kind of media, whether it was video games or books or TV shows. You know, I remember when I was in quarantine, my roommates and I were watching Tiger King or something like Avatar: The Last Airbender. But, you know, it really just put a lot of pressure on digital media professionals, because, you know, everybody was looking to basically escape their quarantine. And that's really changed the way we look at digital media now. It's now become, okay, everybody is focused on what you're doing. How do you escape from the noise of, you know, everything else going on? How do you get people to override things like, you know, maybe I want to watch a special on Amazon or a special on Netflix? How do you get them to look at your content? And that's become, you know, the beauty of it is the market's bigger than ever, and the downside is the market's bigger than ever. I think COVID in terms of classes has changed it because, you know, we do a lot of things online now, and instead of it being like you watch a professor on Zoom lecture for 2 hours, it's much more interactive. An example is we used a lot of applications like, I forget the name of it. I'm so sorry, I forget the name of it, but we would draw with each other. We would create Post-its and poster boards and things like that. And, you know, despite being in front of my computer, I really did connect with other students, whether they were in, you know, overseas or next door to me. And as we've come back to campus, it's just become so much more rewarding to, you know, meet and chat and interact with students, despite being masked and despite being socially distanced, just to be able to be in the same room with them and really enjoy the learning process with them. You know, it's really just so much better now that I know what it was like being online for a whole year. I think the thing that surprised me most about a master's is just the amount of things I didn't know about this industry. You know, I think when you're graduating out of an undergraduate degree, it's really easy to say, yeah, I know like enough, or I have enough understanding of what I'm trying to do. And then you sort of are thrown into the deep end and you're like, wow, this is really something that I did not expect to. I'm so overwhelmed. And, you know, part of the being overwhelmed is there's some kind of enjoyment in that, in a weird way, if that makes sense. Like, you're so overwhelmed by the amount you're learning that it's rewarding, because you're like, there's so much more to this that I didn't know, and now I am exposed to it. On top of that, something else that surprised me is just the amount of really wonderful, really smart, really caring people in this industry that are willing to give up their time and their energy, and sometimes even more than that, to educate emerging professionals like myself and like other Fordham students. I would apply to things that maybe I didn't have the right requirements for professionally, and I would get an email or even a Zoom call from them and say, hey, your resume might not have fit for this position, but it was just so unique that I'd like you to apply for this position. And I don't think that goes on in a lot of other industries. I certainly don't think it goes on in finance. I know the world of medicine is very competitive. And I think media is unique because everybody is so connected that it makes people, especially older professionals, want to help younger professionals succeed more because they understand what it was like to be in our shoes. It's changed me a lot, to be honest. I think the thing I can say the most is that it's made me very aware of how when one entity or institution controls too much of the media narrative, whether it's news or entertainment or publishing with Simon & Schuster and Random House, it corrupts the industry in a sense, and it, erodes the trust that journalists like myself and media professionals have work every day to preserve, and that's dangerous. And we've seen that with erosion of trust in journalism and the press in the past 5 years, in the past 10 years. We've seen it with former President Donald Trump, fake news CNN and attacking media that maybe did not promote him or cover him, I should say, in the most positive light. We've seen it with the rise of Fox News subsidiaries like One American News, other subsidiaries like that. Really what it's taught me is that, just because you have one voice does not mean you're powerless in this field. If anything, people want to hear about your experience as a young professional, your experience as someone who's so deep in this industry, and why you care about changing that perspective. A big thing I had this summer when I was working my summer job was people were like, oh, well, you're a journalist, like you cover fake news. And I'm like, no, I don't cover fake issues. Like, it's not fake. It's just sometimes people cover issues in a way that you maybe don't agree with. And I think that's really important, that people understand that just because one media entity like the New York Times or CNN or whatever covers a story that in a way you don't agree with does not mean the story itself is false. It just means that the journalist is subject to different biases, institutional restraints, things like that. So, I would really like to see that. Sorry. I would really just like to see with my degree, when I go into, the journalism field, that people understand that media is biased, but that doesn't mean it's false. I think what I could say to prospective students thinking about a master's in any field, but especially media management, is make sure what you're pursuing is your real passion, because this is not like an introductory tip of the iceberg program for any program. This is a very in-depth, very rigorous, very challenging, learning experience that you're paying a lot of money to do, and that you really need to make sure that whatever you're studying, you are 100% invested in. I definitely reconcile with myself that this is what I want to do. Digital media is my passion. And it didn't take me a day or a week. It took me a month, 2 months, talking with friends and family and, admissions people and former students and people working in the industry. So, make sure that this is really what you want to do. For media management students, I would say just consume as much positive media as possible. When I say that, I mean, read as many newspapers as you can. Read about what you're interested in. Read about marketing trade publications or advertising publications, and learn about what sector of media you're really interested in, because it's so broad and it's so easy to say, yeah, I like digital media, but I have no idea what I want to do there. Are you interested in content creation? Are you interested in the back end when you're implementing, with code or HTML or Google Ads to an extent, Google Analytics? Are you interested in research? So really find your niche and your sector. And that's not to say don't explore others, but have a goal in mind, have maybe a company in mind, have a position in mind when you go in, because it's so easy to be overwhelmed by the sheer amount of opportunity available to you.